Chapter 24 deals with solid and hazardous waste. Think about all that garbage that you throw away that is a product. Big case study is, and a big problem is with e-waste. Think about all those computers you have in your basement doing nothing. What do you do with them? Actually, around here we have drives once in a while where you can bring them. Electronic waste is by far the fastest growing solid waste problem. Unfortunately, lots of them end up in landfills, even though they could be stripped down and reused or recycled, especially. Some incinerators. Incinerators are when you burn things. Burning thing is never a good resolution. Generally, if you see something being burned, like an electronic, it gives off lots of black smoke, which indicates that it's an oil product, which indicates that it's really bad for our environment. Composition includes everything from very high quality plastics. Think about that monitor you have. That's a very strong plastic. Polymer, very valuable metals like copper, toxic and hazardous pollutants. A lot of these actually end up in other countries, particularly developing countries. In Switzerland, in Basel, Switzerland particularly, they have the International Basel Convention. What that did was banned hazardous waste from developed countries to developing countries. On the cover of National Geographic a couple years back, they actually showed a child in India, developing country, that was stripping the insulation off of wires from inside of a computer trying to get at the copper because the copper is worth so much. So that poor kid had a lighter burning off the insulation, was breathing in all those fumes. The European Union has really adopted an idea of cradle-to-grave approach. So but you're basically responsible from the time you buy a computer, for example, all the way till it goes into the landfill, and there generally is a cost associated with. Just a little picture here, you can see the huge pile of e-waste and other waste products which these poor people are scavenging through. Recycle, reuse. Of course, solid waste contributes to pollution. It includes valuable resources that, quite honestly, we could reuse or recycle. We're going to run out of those virgin materials eventually. Why not just reuse them? Hazardous waste contributes to pollution, as well as natural capital degradation, health problems, and, of course, break this down a little bit further. Solid waste, again, the largest amount is industrial solid waste from mining, from farms, from industry. Municipal, you live in a municipality, that is MSW, or municipal solid waste. That's your trash, that's your garbage. Think about how much you bring down to the curb every day. It tends to end up in rivers, lakes, oceans, natural landscapes if it is not handled properly in third world countries. Hazardous waste, think about things like gasoline. Threatens human health and the health of the environment. It's toxic to us. There's different classes of hazardous waste. Organic are things like gasoline and oil because it is carbon-based. Toxic heavy metals are things like lead and mercury that get into our environment. And we can actually get radioactive waste too, even if it's in low dose for our environment. Of course, the United States are a leader in solid waste problem. Of course, we also produce a lot of solid waste too. In trash production by weight per person, we are the leader in solid waste. 98.5% of all solid waste is from industrial, as was defined in the slide before this. Most waste breaks down very slowly. There's terms like biodegradable. Biodegradable generally breaks down within a year or two. Paper, for example. However, lots of things like plastics, diapers, we don't even know how long it takes in the environment. They haven't had them around that long. Here's just a little picture of a family, a typical United States family, and look at all the garbage they're producing on there. And a lot of that could be recycled. A sustainable approach to solid waste, of course, is reduce it in the first place, don't use as much. And we're getting a lot better at this. Reuse it, recycle it. Finally, if we need to dispose of it in a proper manner. A couple ways of getting rid of it. We look at something called waste management. Now, when you manage something, you try to reduce it. Reduce the harm, I should say, but not really the amount. So you produce all this garbage and you try to just manage it, recycle some of it, what you can. I guess some goes in the landfill naturally, but it shouldn't be a majority. Waste reduction, obviously, is use less. Focus on things like reuse, recycle, and even composting it, which we'll talk about in a bit. Integrated waste management really comes up with a variety of strategies. And of course, we have things even like hazardous waste collections in this area, and that's part of that, getting rid of waste, which is a really good thing. Take a look. Sorry about the bell there. Take a look at this picture. We start up with raw materials, so we get those out of the ground. It could be aluminum, it could be anything from tin, copper, anything like that. We process it, we manufacture it, and we get products from it. And what happens is we consumers buy that. we get waste generated by households and businesses, and really we have a couple options. We could recycle them, which we should be doing. We can make a compost pile, which we'll talk about a little bit more in class, which is a great idea. Any hazardous waste needs to be brought to the proper place to get destroyed. Generally with hazardous waste, they can high temperature destroy them, and then hopefully it won't affect the environment at all. And of course we can even look at remaining mixed waste. Sometimes that does go to landfill, as I said, sometimes the incinerator, ideally not the incinerator. Sometimes this compost, which is an excellent way to go with your excessive food, can actually go to creating nice black dirt or fertilizer to grow. So we can cut solid waste by refusing. If we don't buy those products, that think about when you're applying to colleges, all that junk mail that you get. And let's just refuse in the first place. Let's get rid of that. The reality is, in a digital world right now, we don't need all that stuff. So waste reduction is based on refusing it, don't use it, reducing it, use less of it. Again, reusing it over and over again. It used to be, of course, back in the day when I was in high school, I had a job at a grocery store, and what we did was you bought bottles, glass bottles of soda, and you put a deposit down on them, like 10 cents per bottle, and then when you brought them back, you got your 10 cents back, and then they were high-pressure sanitized, and new Coca-Cola products were put in it. That's a great idea. Recycle it. Eventually, we're going to run out of those raw materials, or it's going to become not economically feasible to get them. Composting, of course, using bacteria to decompose biodegradable waste. Some of these maybe in your backyard. A couple strategies to do all those things. Change industrial process to eliminate harmful chemicals. So try as much as possible. Of course, industry, of course, the leader in these toxic stuff in our environment. Redesign manufacturing to use less material and energy. Oftentimes, if you get a package in the mail, it has a lot of stuff around it to keep it from bouncing around. Well, let's reduce that size of the package in the first place. Develop products that are easy to recycle. Eliminate unnecessary packaging, kind of what I already alluded to. Use fee per bag waste collection system. So when you get X amount of bags, or everybody uses the same garbage bags, for example, in your city, and then what happens if you put 5 of them out, you get charged $5. If you put 3 of them out, you get charged $3. Whatever the case may be, that would definitely reduce. Establish cradle-to-grave systems, which I already talked about, of course, is doing an excellent job. So a couple things, just a little graphic on what I just talked about. We should reduce, we should reuse, we should recycle / compost. Incinerate is limited, again, because we don't want to release those toxic substances in the environment. And bury at the last, because we don't know, burying it, of course, a lot of those toxins can get into our groundwater. What we do in the United States is we tend to bury. We recycle about 23%, or compost about 23% of what we of everything. We incinerate 9%, so we're not burning a lot. We reuse only 0.2%. That is terrible. Think about even just reusing the grocery bags. You can get those bags now. You can do fundraisers with them and bring them back to the grocery store. Some grocery stores are actually starting to charge now for using their grocery bags, and reducing, we're less than 0.1%, which we waste a lot. We can reduce resources. We can, of course, decrease our consumption of matter and energy resources. Energy, we've talked about already, too, is turn the lights off once in a while. Reduce pollution, natural capital degradation. Of course, we save money, which is the huge benefit. There are alternatives to the throwaway economy. We tend to live in a throwaway economy where we just get it and we throw away the excess packages. Think about food, done, out of our sight and mind. We increasingly substitute throwaway items for reusable ones. That's a great idea. Reuse is on the rise. We're getting there. You see more of those shopping bags around, for example. Ireland, Taiwan, and Netherlands have actually gone to taxing plastic bags. Actually, when you go to the grocery store, you're better off getting the paper bags. You're better off bringing your own bags, reusable ones. But if you get the paper ones, they're actually recyclable versus the plastic. If they end up in a landfill, what's going to happen is it's going to take 50, 60, 70, hundreds of years for that to break down. The best thing to do with those plastic is so what can you do? Buy beverages in refillable glass containers, as I mentioned. Use reusable. So anyway, reusing those lunch containers. Store refrigerated food in reusable containers. When you have leftovers, put them in plastic bins. Just don't heat them up in those plastic bins if they have BPA in them. Use rechargeable batteries. When eating out, bring your own reusable containers for leftovers. Carry groceries and other items in a reusable basket or cloth bag. Buy used furniture and other. Those are becoming more popular where we have secondhand stores. Great potential for recycling. We have a primary, also known as a closed loop recycling. Materials are recycling in the same thing. So it's a closed loop. So something glass is used, again, as a glass product. Secondary recycling is when materials are converted to other products. Tires, for example, may be converted into something else, like a tar product or something that can be used on the roof. But again, we're reusing it, which is great. Tires are something that needs to be recycled because if they catch fire, they burn forever and they release that oil. Types of waste that can be recycled. Pre-consumer, think about it. At the manufacturing process, let's get rid of that waste at the manufacturing process. But then once we buy it, post-consumer, external waste is generated by product use. So what happens is then we buy it and then we throw it away instead of reusing excess of stuff you throw away. With incentives, we could, in the United States, recycle, compost about 80% of our municipal solid waste. Why we're not there yet, I'm not sure. Composting, of course, what we're doing is we're getting organic matter. We can use that organic matter to supply plant nutrients, slow soil erosion, retain water, and even improve crop kind of thing. More people need to do it. We do have material recovery facilities known as MRFs. What material recovery facilities are is you basically throw everything together, your trash and your recyclables, and then they sort it out at the factory. The problem is that tends to promote just not even recycling in the first place or at all. Source separation is pay as you throw. In other words, as if you throw, the more garbage you have, the more you pay, the more you get taxed, whatever the case may be. That's going to reduce. That's going to make you recycle even more. And fee per bag system is. Paper is by far something that needs to be recycled more. We throw so much paper away in the United States. It's awful. That takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of water use, fresh water in that particular case. Pollution, very easy to recycle. Paper, it uses 64% less energy, of course, produces 35% less water pollution and 74% less air pollution if we just would recycle it into our landfills or incinerating it. Plastics are tough. Plastics have a number on the bottom. They're composed of resins created from oil and natural gas, so it's a bad combo. That oil really isn't designed to come out of the earth. The numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I believe we up to the higher the number, it tends to be more concentrated plastic and more hard to recycle, although we're getting better at it. Usually it's type 1 and 2, but now we can recycle those other numbers too. Currently, only about 7% of plastic is recycled in the United States, and it's because we have a lot of heavy plastic resins that we don't quite have the technology to do it, and it really isn't. Advantages of recycling, net economic health of our ecosystem, environmental benefits, obviously we don't want that out there. Most of our garbage ends up in the oceans eventually, especially plastics. Disadvantages, it's very costly, and we do have a single pickup system generally in the United States where no separation is actually needed. So the trade-offs, the good and the bad, recycling advantages, again, reduces energy and mineral use, so we don't need to extract those. Remember, mining is a very dirty, toxic process. Let's just avoid that in the first place. Reduce greenhouse gas emissions, reduce solid waste. Disadvantages is it can cost more than burying an area. It definitely can cost more, and if a region doesn't have a lot of money, a county, for example, they're going to bury it, which is terrible. Reduce profits for landfill and incinerator owners, and of course it's inconvenient for us. Advantages and disadvantages of burning or burying solid waste really shouldn't come to this point, but it is a reality. Burning contributes to air and water pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, that CO2. Buried waste eventually contributes to pollution and degradation of land and water resources. Water quality to go down, particularly groundwater. We do have these things called waste-to-energy incinerators, which aren't the worst thing in the world. They heat water up or produce electricity. I'll show you a picture of this in a second. Landfills do emit more air pollutants than modern waste-to-energy incinerators, and I'll show you a modern landfill in a second. Toxic chemicals that are filtered must be disposed of hazard stuff into our landfills. This is a waste-to-energy plant. What happens is we bring garbage in, they dump garbage into here, and we bring it up here, it gets burned in a furnace, it heats the water, produces steam, goes to the turbine, and of course, or turbine rather, and it actually will turn the magnet inside a generator and produce electricity. It's really good. The really good part about this is before this gets released into the environment, the smoke, what happens is we get this thing called a scrubber. A scrubber cleans the bad stuff out. This is like probably a cyclone scrubber, where all the dirty water goes out. We get this stuff called bottom ash right here, so all that bottom ash goes through there, and of course that's taken away and hauled to a waste treatment plant. Now that's kind of bad, but it's not as bad as all the original garbage going there in the first place. We also have something called an electrostatic precipitator. So the wet scrubber is going to take the wet stuff out, the excessive condensation, and then what happens is, again, before it's released into this smokestack right here, is we have a precipitator that takes that heavy fly ash out, and of course that's dumped into waste energy incinerators. It reduces trash volume, produces energy, concentrates hazardous substances for ash for burial. Sale of energy reduces cost. Disadvantages: very expensive to build, produces hazardous waste, emits some CO2 and other air pollutants, and it does encourage waste production. So we do. Burying it, we do have in the United States that required something called sanitary landfills, where we have compacted layers of waste between clay or foam. Remember, like with a confined aquifer, we have that clay layer where bad stuff doesn't get in there, or to the groundwater. That's good. Bottom liners, containment systems, I'll show you pictures in a second. Open dumps are quite a bit more common in developing countries where they just dump the stuff. Large pit, sometimes garbage is burned. That was the case even up until like the 70s and early 80s in the United States, where there'd be a garbage. Everybody's garbage would go out to a landfill area and you just burn it. There's the air. This is a sanitary landfill system, and what happens is we have basically a very thick plastic that goes down here. You can actually, plastic's better, believe it or not, but you can use a clay layer right there too. And what that does is we get the garbage, so this guy's bringing all the garbage here, they're going to dump all the garbage into here, and then they bury it with a clay layer, generally every night. And what that does is it stops the leaching from going down, and what this does is all that bad toxic stuff from decomposition goes out through these pipes and then is treated, could even be treated in a waste treatment plant, and it won't get into your drinking water. That's a really good thing. This is particularly in developed nations. If you ever notice, landfills will actually have these pipes sticking out. What they do is they recover methane. Two reasons for that. First of all, the landfill could blow up if it doesn't. And also we can create energy, and that energy is because we burn it, and it heats a building or it heats water, which produces electricity from it, which a lot of occurring in the United States. So sanitary landfills, the good, very low operating costs. You can see all the garbage in there, and then this guy in the truck will cover it with a clay layer every night. It can handle large amounts of waste. Filled land can be used for other purposes. No shortages of landfill space in many areas. Bad stuff: they can be noisy. You don't want to live by them. A lot of traffic. The trucks going in and out. Dusty. They do release greenhouse gases like methane, CO2 due to decomposition, unless they're collected. Output approach, that does encourage waste. So just throw it away and never see it again. It's kind of the NIMBY principle, not in my backyard, so let's just do it. Eventually it leaks and can contaminate groundwater. That's it for the first part.